Shalom, everybody. Shalom, Professor Lachter. Shalom, Elise. Hi, Flores. Shalom, Lefran. Shalom, Nathan. Shalom, Michael. Okay, I think people will join us soon as well. We are in chapter 5. And if you remember the first 4 chapters, there was a rabbi saying something. But chapter 5 that we're studying now is different because we started with numbers, 10 things, and then 7 things, and then 4 things. And now we finish with the numbers, and we get a series of 4 Mishnayot, 4 sayings, that all of them start with the word call. Everybody can that. And they're talking about different topics, but again, it's not a rabbi saying something. We don't know who is saying what is they saying, and I won't be able to talk about everything. The first one was the כל האהבה שהיא תלויה בדבר, בטל דבר, בטלה אהבה, everything that every love that depends on something. When this something disappeared, so there is not love. And in all of these four Mishnayot, they're bringing some protagonists from the history to make the point. So I'm sure that Professor Lachter is going to talk a lot about the love. So I am going to focus myself in the second one. I'm assuming this issue because of the questions that you're going to talk about. I'm going to focus a little bit on the second one. כל מחלוקת שהיא לשם שמיים סופה להתקיים, שאינה לשם שמיים אין סופה להתקיים. I saw in the translation that we put, they translate the word machloket as dispute. But the word machloket, it could be there is a machloket about what the machloket is. The word machloket can be dispute, like we use the word bikuach in Israel. But machloket can be understood, like, for example, in the army, we have a machlaka. It's a unit, it's a group. Machloket can be also a group. And I think that the better translation for machloket here is group, unit. Now you say, well, machlaka and machloket is not the same, but there's many words that the ending is. For example, when we sing Adon Olam, we say betifara. But at the end we say betifara. Now in modern Hebrew we use the word tiferet, not tifara, tiferet. Now you can say nehedara or you can say nehederet. Tifara, tiferet, nehedara, tiferet. Machlaka, machloket. That's nothing unusual. We can use both words, machloket or machlaka. Modern Hebrew, they like machlaka more. Why? I don't know. Sometimes they like tifara, sometimes tiferet, sometimes nehedara, sometimes nehederet. Instead of yom ha'ulad, yom ha'leida, yom huledet. So you can use both. Now, why I think it's better the group, the unit, than the idea is because what is written here. If you have כל מחלוקת שהיא לשם שמיים סופה להתקיים. If you have a group that is for an idea, it will continue. I mean, the discussion, the dispute, you forget about a little while. A group, not. Look at the Knesset, for example, today. We have a lot of parties. Now, if these parties really represent a series of ideas, these parties will continue. whenever the parties will not represent the real idea anymore, so they disappear, like some political parties that they disappear. That's what it continues. So if we want to know if a party is really have a purpose, really it's not a fashion, but it's really representing something that is needed, it will continue. And they give an example here. My machloket she'il Hashem shamayim. What is machloket Hillel v'Shamayim? Hillel v'Shamayim is not a dispute about one issue. It's two different groups. It's the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai. Now the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai, they will continue exist as long as they represent something. What happened is that Hillel, we are all Beit Hillel. There's a few Beit Shammai, but mostly we are Hillel. And they say, Sheina l'shem shamayim zo machloket Korach v'chol adato. Now the one that is not for the sake of heaven is Korach and his group. Now, why Korach and his group will not continue to exist? Because there was not an ideal, there was not a real reason to exist for a separate group of Jews when we left Egypt. This group was created by Korach in order to gain power, to gain the money, to gain the influence, to gain prestige. Now these things eventually they disappear when you achieve them or when you don't achieve them. And that's why I think here we're talking about, now I'm going to give many examples of groups among the Jewish people, but not only, that will continue. We call them today, to these groups, streams in Judaism, denominations. They are ultra-Orthodox, they are modern Orthodox. They are conservative, they are Reform, they are Reconstructionists, they are Humanists. Now, if these groups among the Jewish people, these denominations, will not have a reason, they will cease to exist. But if they exist, it means that they represent some reason. Now, we may like the reason or we may not like the reason. But let's, for example, look at the Haredim. There's the Haredim that they are Ashkenazim, and there are the Haredim, they are Sfaradim, right? Now, if you will ask us, there's not much difference, right? There's the Halakha, and you keep the commandments. So what's the difference between Sfaradics, Haredim, and Ashkenazic Sfaradim? Should be no different, but they are two different political entities. There is one party is Shas, and one party is Agudat Israel. So, are they L'Shem Shamayim? I think as if for so many years this different was created with the Obadiah Yosef in the 70s, early 80s, right? Well, that's when Shas party emerged. But they continue. So if they continues, is probably, we may like it or not like it, but if there is a reason for their existence, when a group lose the reason for it to exist, so will not exist anymore, and this also may happen. So the proof of existence is that we have a real reason to represent something that at least a group of people needed for, I don't know, forever. I don't know, forever. So that today we have a problem with fashion. There are many groups that they are created on fashion, like Korach. This is a fashion, let's all be priests. Why Moses has to be priest, and then why? Again, I want to say something about these four things. Today we're talking about Amnon Betavar and David Yonatan, Hillel Beshamayim. The reason that many times we bring a figure is because our thought is more abstract, but their thought is more concrete. When you have a person, I wanna say God took us from Egypt with power. So I say biyad chazaka. Why? Power, I don't understand. It's a concept, but yad chazaka, I can see this. I can understand. If I don't, maybe I don't understand what heroism means, but I know David. I don't understand what wisdom means, but I know Solomon on how he judged. So again, they're bringing historical figures because it's easy for them to make the point, for people to understand. So in our society, all the time we created the group for protection of nature in Israel, the group for survivors of cancer, the group of you name it, as many groups as you want. These groups not necessarily must be in dispute with somebody else. You don't have to be in dispute in order to exist. You have to represent a real need. I'm going to give you two more examples. Geshalim Letikva, Congregation Netanya. As long as there is a need, Congregation Netanya was created in 1969 by a group of people. They say we want Judaism, but more Zionist, more egalitarian, more not so strict. We want to have an alternative. So they create. As long as there is a need for this alternative, so you continue to exist. When there is not need, no more. Shalim Letikva was created for a need to make Milut Chasadim, social action, and good deeds, and to help people. If there will be no people to help, I don't see it in the near future. So there will be no reason to exist. So I put it on purpose. I wanted to talk about the machloket, not a dispute. Not everything has to be a dispute and confrontation. That Hillel and Shammai doesn't have to hate each other. They can represent different needs. One will be a more flexible Judaism. One will be a more strict Judaism. And they don't have to be enemies. Also today, the political parties in the Knesset don't have to be enemies. And also us. I know that Professor Lachter is going to talk with you about the lab. So I'm step before. Not everything that you have a different idea came from a different need of a different group. It means has to be in confrontation with somebody else. Sometimes it can be two different ideas that help each other. It's a win-win. Doesn't have to be always a dispute or a confrontation. Two different ideas can coexist, even if they represent opposites, as needs of people to belong be part of. So obviously, if Korah wants to, if one entity wants to destroy the other entity, so eventually only one will survive. But if there are two different opinions, so maybe the point will be to respect the idea of somebody else, to respect the needs of somebody else, the reason to exist of somebody else, and that will be, I think, the first step. The second part will be how we can love somebody else that think different from us. But for this, I'm giving you the microphone, so you will talk about the love. I talk about the to be different without dispute.
Well, that's easy. Actually, it's not so easy. And we'll just a couple notes on what you said here on the spectrum of Judaism, because there are so many groups, really. And there is this emphasis on Leshem Shamayim, meaning for a higher purpose or for a goal. But Leshem Shamayim usually means for holiness, right? For God. So I took a fast look while you were talking about how many nonprofit organizations we have, just to see because they're all, people out there trying to do good. And so it turns out that the number of registered nonprofit organizations in Israel, non-government organizations who are registered, is 40,000.
Awesome.
Easy to love all of those, maybe. And just for comparison, there's 445 in various levels of registration, but there's a total of some 445 nonprofit organizations in all of what you would call the different parts of Palestine. So you can compare those 400 to the 40,000 if you want in terms of recruitment of people to each other.
Let's say the blessing. I just was waiting for you to say the blessing.
Ready. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. So there were different kinds of love in. Let me get the Sharon. Maybe if we have the text up, share, and then share. And you see it? Fran, can you see?
Yes, we can see it.
There we go. Great. So here they say, any love that is dependent on something, when the thing ceases, the love ceases. And that is that not dependent or unconditional love. And an example of Amnon for Tamar was dependent and fell apart, and the love for David and Jonathan were people who stayed together. And I guess the best love statement that we have, and the most central one, is ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha. Love your neighbor as yourself. It's a motto for everyone, and in different faiths in different ways. It's pronounced or phrased. But ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha, very short, 3 words, speaks volumes, and that kind of ahava, you wonder what kind of love that is for other people. And re'echa is a word for a friend or a neighbor. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. So how important are our neighbors to us? A lot of times not so important, but sometimes very important. And I'm sure that I'm with you and the rest of Israel with what's going on today in Israel, that we're getting back hostages. Today, 3 more hostages have been returned. And what that kind of reflects to me is that Israelis are getting together in a really big way to take care of each other, of watching out for each other, of being prepared to sacrifice for each other. Sometimes it's a really big sacrifice. For some of the more moving people who are part of this sacrifice are families who lost someone because one of these terrorist murderers killed a family member, and that terrorist has been in jail for however many years, and now that person is going to go free so that we can get back one of ours. So I think that's a really good example of the "Ahavta l'recha kamocha." I hope none of us will ever be in that situation, not, God forbid, being hostage, and also not having to feel that justice is really against, we're losing out on a justice that we feel that we should have. But it is a form of love within Israel that's really powerful, and that's a Ahavah L'Shem Shamayim. I feel it's a spiritual thing here, so that's really good. The different groups that we had here, so there was different streams that Edgar was talking about, and one of the streams that I've been investigating really pretty deeply, I may write about this, I already started, is our feeling of Zionism, our love of the country. And is that a love that depends on something? Well, if you say, is that love sustained? So you can say that the love of the state of Israel or the land of Israel or the people of Israel has lasted for the 2,000 years that we were in exile. And I think that's pretty sustained. Can't get much more sustained than that. And it continues, and people are making big sacrifices for the state of Israel. I gave one example, but of course the example of soldiers who are putting their lives on the line, and some of them, of course, close to 1,000 have lost their lives in order to undo as much as possible of the damage that the Hamas did and to make them unable to do it again. So that was the kind of central thoughts that I had about that in terms of the types of love that the Torah talks to us about. And I'll be interested in where you find that, because a lot of loves, let's say, are going to be not emotional, but combinations of people. David and Jonathan, of course, had their political reasons for being together, Amnon and Tamar, and so on. Edgar I didn't hear him mention, but I just, for housekeeping, I want to point out that February, he's on what he calls intercession between semesters. So that's going to happen again February, starting next week for a month. And he's going to be doing a lot of stuff, and I imagine I will be too. But just to have that in mind, because I won't be sending out, but I hope you'll keep studying, including working on your own Mishnah or your own Mishnah or motto, whatever you want to call it. So we can discuss what your particular feelings of love about Zionism or about Judaism. But I do want to say a Misha Berach just briefly for Sibi, who you've seen a number of times, who apparently fell and broke her hip or her pelvis, and she's in pretty serious rehab. But hopefully she'll be back online with us soon. And those who know, Sibi is also Edgar's mother-in-law. The other two, which I put in here, so Edgar wrote about the the dispute, here it's written as a dispute. Edgar translated machloket a little bit differently, kol machloket shi l'shem shamayim. But the third one that I wanted to put here is that כל המזכה את הרבים אין חטא בא על ידו. כל המחטיא את הרבים אין מספיקים בידו לעשות תשובה. And this is one who causes the community to be meritorious. In other words, who helps other people or enables or encourages other people to do something in the realm of mitzvah. Nothing bad will come to the person for that. And just the opposite, one who causes the community to do something bad, setting a bad model or something, is not given the opportunity to repent. And that's kind of a central thought right now in the Torah portion, where I think we discussed it in the past, but the really difficult question of, well, God hardens Pharaoh's heart, and so Pharaoh says, I'm not going to let you go until the worst of all possibly imaginable plagues comes to happen, and the issue is, because he has done so badly, he is not given the opportunity to repent. And so this is one way it's looked at. But another thing that I wanted to point out, other than the connection to this parasha, is that I think from what little I know of the people in the group, pretty much everyone is doing something which is influencing other people, and often leading some group of other people. And so it will be interesting to hear how you feel about that last Mishnah, which is that you want to be really careful how you lead other people, because you want the results to be good. I did read up on this Yeroboam, the son of Nebat, who sinned and caused the community to sin. And for those who don't remember him, this was the king over the tribes of Israel, and perhaps he managed to unite the 10 tribes of Israel, but did not get along with the tribe of Judah. And that's where David was. David's was smaller, but they fought each other. And eventually, of course, the 10 tribes are lost. So they lost in battle, or they lost the long war, perhaps. Although most of us are called Yisraeli when we're called up to the Torah, and not Kohen. But Yeroboam, the rabbis have turned him into the real bad guy, even though he's the one who united most of the tribes. So sometimes what looks like you did something bad, that's the agenda of the rabbis there. Okay, so that's as far as I got with these. And Liz, I know you're a leader in bringing people, and that's exciting to hear that your son is planning Aliyah, but that you've also brought a lot of people on Sarel, which I bet a lot of them have also done good. So you're a leader, and maybe you can tell us some of what you can say in terms of how Judaism affects what you feel about love. And I gave the one sentence here that we say in our Shema, of course, you shall love the Lord with all your heart, that aside from loving your neighbor, especially if it's as far away a neighbor as a hostage in Gaza, there's loving God, and I mentioned the Zionism also. Go ahead, Liz, and then we're going to hear from Fran.
Jesse, I just, when you talk about the release of the hostages and, the kind of love that we show toward them, I find it problematic that the equivalent is 30 or 50 Palestinians to one Jew. And that I don't understand at all why, we allow that, and that it doesn't, of course, interfere with my love of Judaism and being Jewish and doing what I can for Israel. And as you mentioned, I do a lot of volunteering with Sarel. And in terms of local community, I try you know, I started with a friend, a group, we're tying the tzitzit for the begadim for the soldiers, and like tonight, I have to go for an activity that we're doing for Rosh Chodesh, teaching people at one of the shuls, for men and women to how to do this, and I feel like, everyone that learns is just, one more person having a better connection to Judaism. And so many people who have never done it tell me, that it's not therapeutic, but they feel a connection while they're doing it in a way almost like a meditation. That they just feel like they're really, really getting, the spirit of what it is and what we're doing. And yes, I'm very excited about my son just arriving, and so that's all I'm going to say.
That's great. There is a question just about how much or who you would give for a hostage. It was problematic when the call was do everything, everything for one life, because that might mean, just learn how to swim and swim into the sea and go away. So we're not going to do that. But I guess our people did the best negotiating they could, and if they came up with a formula that it's 30 for one, all I can think of is who could do better? Could we
But
do better?
I
We
think,
didn't have someone else to send who would knock it down to 1 for 1 or 10 for 1 or one of theirs for 30 of ours.
yeah, I mean, but I just think it reinforces in the world opinion, how little we think of them, that, that we're willing to do that. And as I had read from Dershowitz, who said, this isn't a deal, it's, exploitation. We didn't, they keep calling it a deal, and it's not. This is not how you make a deal with somebody. We didn't have, it was not an even process, but I'll let it go at that.
Yeah, someone might read the book, The Art of the Deal. Fran?
Yeah, this thing about, love that is not dependent on anything, that never ceases, flipped in my mind to unconditional love. And I
Exactly.
think that it is love that doesn't require, for example, I love members of my family who do not agree with me on politics. And I would love them if they did things that I did not consider correct, because I love them. And I think that way about Israel, because after I made Aliyah over the last 17 years, there have been times, including right now, where it has not been the Israel that I would like it to be. And yet I love it unconditionally, and nothing will ever change it. I may weep for it. I may feel bad for it because it is not the Israel it could be. And this is a personal issue, it's nothing to do with politics. But I think that's what that is. And I think that is how we view God. And to say you love your neighbor as yourself means you recognize your neighbor's humanity and you don't care about your neighbor's disagreements with you or the things your neighbor does wrong, mowing the lawn or not mowing the lawn or whatever neighbors do or don't do. And that's how I see it. As far as I would like to follow up on what Liz talked about, I, of course, also agree it's awful that we have to give so many prisoners for one hostage. But more than that, I worry that we free a prisoner who will go on to kill somebody else's wife, child, mother, whatever. And that in a way we're saving one and ultimately we'll be sacrificing another. That's a part that really bothers me.
Yeah. Well, there's a question about what's worth more, having one in the hand
Yeah.
or 30 in the bush.
Yeah, but it's an impossible. There's no solution. The only solution is not to get anybody kidnapped. That's the only way that's the only way around it, and it's impossible. So
Yes.
yeah. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, well, as an optimist, I believe that there is a solution, but the solution will have to be a political solution and not a military solution. And eventually, God willing, we'll get to that. Terrific. Flores, and then we got Michael be unmuted.
Yes.
I see
I'd
Mama
like
Tetra.
to speak about just a little bit on about Zionism that you were saying. On one of the Zoom meetings that I was on this week, somebody had been to a funeral, and where it was the person who was being buried had left a note for his grandchildren. It was read at the graveside, and he left this note for his grandchildren to say, if you're going to leave Israel, I want you, before you go, to leave a flower on the grave of a soldier. And I was so emotional about that because, unfortunately, when you look at the ages of the soldiers, they are so very young. And I thought this grandfather thought in future of his grandchildren, of if they ever left Israel, that's what he would like them to do. That's what I wanted to say about that. So, what question would you like me to answer?
No, I gave you too many questions. You have to choose, huh? Well, why don't you tell
Yes,
me when you don't argue?
oh, yes, yes, very difficult. When I was young, I always thought people who were old just didn't understand that the world had changed and they were like this and then. And now I'm in that place and I realize that I'm a very tolerant person and it's the youth that are very difficult to get on with. But I find that I must be, I think, I would like to think I am tolerant because I had a grandson who came to me and said he was having a problem being religious. He's in the army and he's surrounded in his unit. He's the only religious boy or man. He's 22. So he just thought that he didn't want to be religious anymore, and he wanted me to know. I was gobsmacked. I just didn't know what to say. I just didn't say anything. And I can see when I meet him, and occasionally when he's in Syria at the moment, and he sent me a photograph of the Hermon from the other side. And I saw him a few Shabbatot ago, and I see where he seems to be coming back. He bears the tiniest little kippah, the tiniest. If you blinked, you wouldn't see it. So I don't know whether it means anything. So, but I notice his parents just let him be as he is. So it's very difficult. I have friends who, uh, you know, eat food that I wouldn't have. And they say, oh, I shouldn't have told you. And I say, I think I've mentioned it here. God is going to ask me about me. He's not going to ask me about you. So I don't know about influencing. It's very difficult to see because what I pick up and I think, oh, I'd like to do that. That's a good thing. I don't know what other people like and they would like to do or copy. So it's our vision of what we think will make us better people that we follow.
Well, that's great. And just to remind you that and all of us, that there is a flip side. Some of the people who are religious go into the army and then become not religious to fit in because they don't see anyone else religious and they feel, and maybe they're exposed for the first time of what it's like to be not religious. Naftali Bennett would be a good example of that. And the reason I'm giving that example is because then, as we all know, he became religious again sometime after leaving the army, which has nothing against the fact that he then went and married someone who is not religious, and they have learned to become tolerant and a good team together, including that their kids go to religious school. So it goes both ways, and it also goes the way that someone who is secular is expected to serve in the army, even though many of the people in the unit may be religious, and that may be of influence. I have a funny story about that when my son was in basic training, the religious kids got to go to prayer, and anyone who said they're not going to go to prayer had to go to the kitchen and do kitchen patrol and wash tons of dishes. So a lot of kids who were not really religious ever before chose to sit in the synagogue during prayer, but my kid was very determined and ended up doing kitchen patrol duty morning after morning after morning after morning, but he stuck to his guns that he was not going to go pretend to be praying if he had no interest in praying and no feeling about praying. So how you fit in can work in all the directions. But I agree with you very much also that with age we can become more tolerant or more accepting and more allowing other people without arguing, without coming up with a dispute. So that's great. Thank you for that. Michael, then we got Nathan, then we got Bev and Ted.
In response to something Eliz said, when Israel made the deal for Gilead Shalit, giving 280 Palestinians who were terrorists, we set the precedent. And that's where the problems come from. Is a Jewish life worth more than a Palestinian? Well, giving one life for 30 may be an argument to say that Palestinians really have no value. But the Palestinians that are being turned over, Israel made a big mistake. They should have executed them. Unfortunately, Israel does not have capital law, capital punishment, except in very, very rare circumstances. And I really wonder what Israel is going to do when you turn over 30 terrorists and you got a body back instead of a live person. I wonder how that's going to play on the Israeli psyche. But off that topic, we, depending on the individual, you may love unconditionally. It may be based on something, the way you were brought up. You learn something. You learn basically, I know individuals that have been married for 74 years, my grandparents, and I know people that have been married a dozen times. So if something is within us as to why it becomes unconditional with one person and maybe not another. My first cousin, he wound up divorced from his first wife. And the second wife, they've been married over 40 years. So it's something that may cause you to have unconditional love with one person and not another. It may be a mutual feeling. It could be something that causes you to have that. You trust the person implicitly. Therefore, well, I may not always agree, but I love you enough to say, okay, I overlook it. And they do the same thing. But it should and must be mutual. Because if not, it's going to break down on one part from one party.
Yeah. Well, marriage is certainly one kind of love. I'm with you there. And I want to make a point of just saying that things are a little worse than you thought. For Gilad Shalit, Google says there were and 27 Israeli security prisoners released. So that was pretty
Oh,
awesome.
I just looked it up and it turned out they said 280 serving life sentences.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't
Those-
know, but it was a mistake. By giving such a high quantity, oh, how dare you say you're not going to give me? Oh, we want this. And it then becomes a negotiation, but they're never going to settle for one because we set the precedent of giving a high number the first time.
Yeah. Well, that wasn't the first time either. The
That's
first
the
times
major
that
one.
we had these problems came up in the Talmud, but the first time in modern Israel, I'm not sure which was the very first time, but there was a huge prisoner exchange in that Rabin did, and there was one for Elchanan Tenenbaum plus two bodies of soldiers, and that was also about 1,000 for three. So yeah, but there is no set formula, obviously, what it's worth. But I do emphasize that the idea that we're willing to go way out now for a hostage, and the Rambam says, but don't overpay, because as Michael Nurek says, if you overpay, then you're setting a bad example, and the price will just keep going up. So that's a really good point. Nathan?
I guess I'm going to continue on the same tangent. And Jesse, you're correct. Gilad Shalit was over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners were exchanged for Gilad Shalit, including Sinwar, who became the head of Hamas and is considered responsible for October 7th. Yeah, I know we talked about love your neighbor as yourself, and I don't know that we can extend that to all neighbors. We're fighting a war currently still. Maybe future generations, there will be peace, and there can be love your neighbors as yourself. We do have peace treaties, and we have the Abraham Accords with a number of countries, and so maybe there's a precedent for starting love between mutual, antagonistic sides. This also happened after World War II with relationships eventually with like Japan, the United States, and Germany and the United States. But the prisoner exchange also is it seems to just apply to Israel because so I don't know if it was supposedly to take place. 5 Thai prisoners who were hostages since October 7th were going to be released today, but there was no exchange for them. But the fact that they were held as hostages for just as long or longer than some of our hostages, and there's also still 2 hostages that we think are alive that Hamas has been holding for 10 years or longer.
Yeah. Just an interesting concept about the the ones from Thailand. At one point, it seemed that most of the Thailand prisoners that were taken, who were agricultural workers near Gaza, were released early with a kind of a deal between Iran and Thailand that Thailand would say, we're not going to send you any more agricultural workers, and Iran would tell Hamas to release them. And that's part of why we're now getting people from India instead of Thailand. But some Thailandis have been coming nonetheless. But it gives you an idea of how complicated it is, these who's against who. Okay, Mom, I hope on your screen you could see the questions in terms of Judaism about love, and you might say what you love about Judaism.
I love about Judaism is that the more you learn, the more you realize that there's a lot more to know. And it just seems to be just just endless how deep you could go with Judaism and how gratifying it is to study with other people, because that's part with a chavruta or one companion, and the and it amazes me how the sages were able to understand all the complexity of life and touch on different points. As far as the hostages are concerned, as a mother, I give the world to redeem my children. As a citizen without children there, I'm sure that it's very difficult to see large numbers of prisoners who, many of whom have blood on their hands and killers, to be released, and not to be very personally involved. But I think in Israel, all the people are involved with all the people, and even non-religious are concerned about the religious. That people are very concerned about other people. In America, I don't see that very much. So it's a very complex topic, and it depends on who you're thinking about, what time in life you are thinking about them, what loss does to you. And my brain is shrinking, so I can't really come up with a definitive answer, but I know what I feel, and I don't attribute that to anyone else. And everyone has their own grief and their own expectations and their own everything. So I think children should be loved so they understand what love is. And maybe when we all can love a little bit more, maybe we'll be able to settle some of the issues of the world. Sorry, I can't be more specific.
Well, that's very specific and really nice. That's terrific. The one issue you're comparing a little bit how it feels in the great big United States, 40 times as big as Israel, that people seem to be willing to do less for each other. I just would point out that as we discuss the release of hostages again, that each Israeli who says, okay, I can live with 30 for one or 1,000 for one, is taking risk on myself or herself or himself, in that we know that killers are going to be released who are interested in killing us, and we're taking the risk, and we're trusting that the Israeli government and the military will protect us and prevent that from happening, and that there will be justice when they try again, because we know a percentage will be trying again. So that's part of how this works. It's pretty close. You feel it pretty close, as opposed to in America and the American wars, which for the last quite a few years have been pretty far although not much further than 911 in that sense. Ted?
Well, as far as loving thy neighbor, the contradiction to that is good fences make good neighbors. And I think that the latter is the greater reality. Love thy neighbor just like the Ten Commandments. They don't represent the reality. They represent the goal. And I don't believe that loving thy neighbor or the Ten Commandments will ever be even nearly close to being observed by by people. So, and some societies, loving thy neighbor is looked down upon altogether. The beauty of the Jewish faith is at least it's a goal. And I think in general, that's what Jews work towards as a people, but certainly not as individuals. And personally speaking, we had a neighbor on one side of our apartment and another neighbor on the other side. Well, one neighbor who unfortunately just passed away was an ideal neighbor. We got along wonderfully. And I'm talking about 40 years, just like that marriage. So, of course, not as intimately. On the other side of us, on the other hand, was a neighbor who lived next door just as long. We never even learned their name, and I'm sure they didn't know ours. Accidentally, we would occasionally meet and say good morning, good afternoon. Nothing more personal than that. I don't call that loving one's neighbor. So in the real world, we're very, very far from the ideals of the Ten Commandments and love thy neighbor.
Well, thank you for a realistic assessment as to how close we are to some of the ideals. But even more important is your reminding us that Pirkei Avot is all about ideals. It's all about goals that we set for ourselves, that those are the directions we want to go. And of course, the worthwhile life is the one that you've chosen, that's thoughtful, that goes in the direction, that you know which way you want to go, and you may never get there. And for most of Pirkei Avot, the discussions of are given in a way that, as Mom said, are filled with wisdom, but even understanding that wisdom, understood that that these are ideals, And we all choose which ideal we're going to emphasize and which directions we're going to go. And with that, I'm going to close this session and this semester, so to speak. And I wish you all a good Shabbat and a fruitful February. It's a chance to think of your own Mishnah or to study and to choose different areas. As we say, we choose and hopefully choose wisely and enjoy those choices. So Shabbat Shalom all.
Thank you, Jesse. Shabbat Shalom.
Toda rabah, Shabbat
Thank you.
Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for studying together.
The